Welcome, everybody, to this week's episode of Walking with the Savior podcast. I'm your host, John Merrill Kirkman, and I'm here today with a new friend, pod, uh, YouTuber Ryan Mercer. Ryan, tell us a little bit about your YouTube channel.
My YouTube channel. It has no direction. It's just my little outlet to the world. And I kind of just put anything and everything up there from my testimony to product reviews of stuff I've bought and been frustrated with, like weed whacker heads.
Awesome. It's kind of a eclectic, little bit of everything YouTube channel. And I admire what you do and how you've grown your channel. It's been awesome. But I found Ryan just one day looking on YouTube, and somehow your one of your videos popped up on my feed, and it was a testimony kind of your journey to find truth in your life and your conversion. And so I reached out to Ryan and asked him to come on, and he was gracious enough, and I'm just so pumped to have him today. So thanks for joining us, everybody. And Ryan, let's start with, you kind of described in your life, looking back, that you kind of were in this dark period before you found God, Jesus, and some things. So tell us a little bit about that, just to give us an idea where you were at.
Sure. So, 12 days before I turned 13, who I thought was my father at the time was my stepfather, passed away of cancer. And we
Mm,
were pretty active in religion at the time. And I just got like this, why would God take my father away from me?
mm.
And I kind of just turned my back on God for like the next 6, 7 years, 5 years. And then I kind of started looking at religions and trying to find truth again because I'd been doing a lot of dumb stuff as a teenager, as teenagers sometimes do. And I thought I knew better and could do my own thing. So I started looking for religion. Eventually, I found the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints, and I'm glad I did.
Mm. So, what was the push to find religion again if you were doing some stupid stuff? And
I just kind of noticed that my life was not going the direction I wanted it to. We were doing really dumb stuff, and we drove under a semi in high school, and just to see if we could, and just making really dumb decisions and like substance issues. And I just got to a point where I realized I had just like dropped out of high school and got my GED just because I didn't want to wait 6 months. And I was like, yeah, I I need some sort of direction or compass. And then I kind of remembered how happy I had been going to church as a kid. Like I would go to these retreats called Mountaintop in Tennessee or Kentucky, where you'd go as a youth for 2 weeks, and it was kind of like a service mission where you would go and like help the local community, build sheds, do weeding, whatever. And just that act of service always felt great. And I wasn't doing that on my own. I was serving myself, and that was about it. And I just started looking at the religions again because when you look at religious people, what do? They're usually charitable, they're kind, they're supportive of each other, and that was something I just kind of felt I was really missing. And hey, that's what Jesus's whole ministry was basically.
so, in your story that I listened to, you talk about kind of a period where after you kind of after you kind of joined the church and started going, you kind of fell away for a little bit, or how would you describe that period?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things in the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter day Saints that members kind of take for granted, knowledge especially. And when I joined the church, I was young single adult age, and there was a young single adult ward or branch, I guess, in our meeting house. So they quickly pushed me over to there, and I kept going back to the family ward, and I just didn't really feel welcome. But then the first general conference that I was a member of the church happened, and people just kept saying general conference is going to happen. I had no idea what that was. So I show up to the church building. There's no one there, and I sit for like 2 hours, and I'm like,
Oh, oh,
okay, I'm not going to go next week. And then it became years. I went once or twice more after that. Just kind of like, are these people still there? And I just drifted away. It was easier to go to White Castle, which we have out here in the Midwest, and on Sunday and get breakfast than it was to get dressed and go to church for 3 hours at the time. And I just went back into my kind of old habits and patterns and got right back in a bad place. And yeah.
so just all a miscommunication, and wow, that's one of those things where early in church attendance, no, somebody's not communicating exactly what is going on with general conference. So how far did that go for you after, stopped going? Where did you end up?
So I joined the church when I was 20, and I had been drinking long before that. But I turned 21 right around the time I joined the church, shortly after I joined the church. So I started drinking a lot again and got involved in like these. It was an ultra lounge, which was like this super upscale nightclub. And the owner and I became friends, and I just kind of, instead of being at church, I was sleeping off a hangover or
Mm,
still drunk when church should have been coming, and then I got stuck in that rut for years, and then I kind of came to this moment where I was like, I really got to do something here with my life. I was
mm,
drinking a fifth of alcohol a night at one point, just to sleep because I was so used to being in that state. And I was just like, I can't keep doing this. I'm going to die. And that's when I started looking for church stuff again because I was like, I was always really happy with the church, and I loved the people, and I liked the idea of another testimony of Jesus Christ because it made it seem more real to me that he didn't just talk to this one group of people, but he talked to this other group and the living prophets and all this structure and order. So I started looking for church content online, and this would have been 7, 8 years ago, and there wasn't really anything. I found a channel called the Three Mormons. It's now Saints Unscripted, and it was really like juvenile and kind of corny, but it was like my little way to get my foot back in the door.
mm. And so you kind of, well, what was your next step to actually come back into the door?
So I looked up church service times again, um, just to make sure I had it right. And I watched Saints Unscripted, Three Mormons, whatever it was called at the time, for maybe a couple of weeks to like kind of reintegrate. And I went to the Latter day Saint subreddit, which coincidentally I now moderate. But I kind of
Hmm.
just would start browsing some threads and looking at stuff. And finally, I like worked myself up to it to go back. And I went to the ward that I'm now in. No, no, I'm sorry, I did not. I went to the ward that I was baptized in because I was still in that boundary. And I started
Mhm.
going for, I don't know, 2 or 3 months. And then I moved into this ward. And yeah, I've been going since. I think I've missed 2 or 3 weeks of church because either I was ill or my wife was ill.
So how did this journey impact you once you started coming back? How did it impact you, and what did it do for your relationship with Jesus Christ, and how did that impact your life?
So shortly after I came back, um, I was now outside of the YSA age, and I was trying to find anything I could to get plugged back into the church. So I started going to the tri-stake mid-singles stuff, and they had the three patriarchs from the stakes, and they talked about the patriarchal blessing. And everyone, they said, raise your hand if you have your patriarchal blessing. And I was the only one that didn't raise my hand out of 60 people. I was like,
Mm.
huh, what is that? And then I looked into that, and I was like, oh, I want this. This is like kind of a personal guide for me. And then I got that ball rolling. That happened right before I moved into my current ward. But there were things in there that I did not believe were going to happen at all. Spoilers, they started happening within months. But it
Okay, let's
talked
back
about
up
my.
just a little bit.
Sure.
Let's back up a little bit. Let's just explain what this patriarch, what do you mean? Three patriarchs and
So,
then patriarchal blessing. Let's explain that for our audience.
sure. So, in the church, we have things called patriarchs. And a patriarch is appointed for a group of local congregations. And the patriarch's primary duty is to give something called a patriarchal blessing. And they lay their hands on you. You sit down, in a chair. They lay their hands on you, and they give you a little bit of revelation with their priesthood authority that they have. They hold the keys for that, and they can give you this little, it's a couple pages sometimes one page, sometimes 5 pages, and they they let God speak through them and tell you a little bit about your potential, I guess.
Yeah, awesome. So that's kinda on the long lines of Genesis, I wanna say 48 to 50, where Abraham gives his sons a blessing before, no, not Abraham, Abraham. Isaac gives his sons blessings before his passing, somewhere in there, right?
Yep.
And so it's kind of like this blessing that, uh, a prophecy maybe over your life, or some spiritual guidance for your life. And and what was that experience like for you, first of all?
Yeah, so it was very interesting. I went into it thinking it was going to be a cold read because the patriarch wanted to talk to me a little bit before to get to know me and stuff. And I was like, cool, he's just going to ask me some questions and then tell me, what the church wants me to hear and what he thinks I want to hear.
What do you mean
And
by cold read?
psychics, quote unquote psychics, will do a cold read where they talk to you for a minute and then they get kind of, they fish for clues. And I went into it as a skeptic. And within a month, I was like, "Oh no, this is real. This is from God." And they were just, it told me these things, and I saw them start to happen. And as I started to do some of the things it told me to do, like my life just turned around. But there was a specific part that talked about my elder brother Jesus Christ and what
Mhm.
he wanted for me, and something about that just like struck a chord, and I was like,
Mm.
oh yeah, like Jesus died for my sins, and here I am being a buffoon out here, just wasting my potential. And that one line, your elder brother Jesus Christ, that just like hit home, and I was like, okay, I got this.
Wow, that's cool. Um, when you got that, how did that impact you?
It it was interesting because again, like I said, I kind of felt skeptical about it, but I was like, hey, it tells me to do some things here in regards to the church. I guess I could try that. And if anything, I used it as a way to be like, oh, I'm going to prove it wrong. And it kind of got me like a fire under me. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to go to church every week and I'm going to go to these things and I'm going to start studying the scriptures and I'm going to ask for a calling. And, because I never had a calling at that point. And so I wasn't serving anyone in the church. I wasn't, it was just about me still. And it kind of gave me that momentum.
And how did that impact things?
Uh, Pretty much everything, all but one thing in that patriarchal blessing have come true, and it completely changed my life. Like I met my wife. I spoke in state conference a year after and was able to share my conversion story with people and hopefully, either help people that were struggling or maybe help some investigators or new converts that were there and help them to know that, yeah, you're not alone. Like, and it just, it was amazing because, sorry, I'm for the viewers, I'm looking at a picture of Jesus up here on my wall. It,
Cool.
I just, it made me want to be more Christ-like. I wanted me to emulate Christ in my life because he did these things for me, and then here he is appearing in the patriarchal blessing, and almost like he's speaking to me through the distance of time. And I'm just like, I got you. I'm gonna try not to let you down.
That's awesome. Wow, I was just thinking and pondering about what you shared. That was very touching. What has Jesus meant to you? What Let's ask this. What was it like to feel like Jesus was speaking to you through this patriarch?
I almost say it
As you
was,
look back on it,
yeah, I almost say it was like scary because it's like, well, what if this is true? What if this is really, is this me kind of being not chastised, but kind of mentored a little? Like, hey, you could do a little bit better. And because all the things that in it were just like, they were kind of emulating Christ, like, oh, you need to do this. And it was all things of either service or applying myself to, Christ's ministry on earth. And I'm just like, yeah, like it felt like someone was in my corner. And well, I guess someone was in my corner. Jesus was in my corner, but I felt it that time.
hmm and it sounds like you acknowledged that for a while you were in it for yourself, and that's shifted a little bit. Can you tell us
Sure.
about that?
Yeah, like when I first went back to the church, it was just, I recognized I had this drinking problem and things weren't going well. And I kind of had no moral compass at the time. And it was all about me. It was like, oh, well, I'll go use these people to like get my life back on track and, have
Mhm.
someone that's like holding me accountable. Hey, why weren't you at church? Uh, you know, so then as I started to go and, I got the patriarchal blessing, I moved to this ward. Uh, Funny story, actually. When I was in that ward, the bishop, as I was moving to my current ward, he realized I had not been given the Aaronic priesthood, so he did that right there in his office, and then pushed my record over to my new ward. And even just that, it was like it was kind of like a, I don't know, a signal or a flare gun or something, and it was like, okay, here's this first little piece. We're gonna trust you with this, and go do my work, and we'll see from there. And I don't know, for some reason it just felt like someone was trusting me, or Jesus was trusting me, God was trusting me. And
Mhm.
I think maybe right there when Bishop Leffler did that is kind of when that scale tipped to go more towards being a follower of Christ and less getting Ryan out of his situation.
Mm. I love how you phrase that, where you're like, "Okay, we're gonna trust you with this. We're gonna give you a little bit of responsibility, authority. Now go do my work." I love that. How's that mindset shifted you from that point? Or just,
Sure. I accepted a calling. I became the elders quorum secretary, and not super involved in a ward our size, but you do find yourself like, okay, I got to keep track of these people, and I got to schedule this and reach out to these people about something. And it's kind of one of those things where you're like, oh yeah, I need to set aside some time for someone else today. And then you
mm,
had to, follow through with those things. And you think about Jesus and how he would just get up and wander and go from place to place, or in the TV series The Chosen, that kind of makes it feel even realer because you get to see some dramatized struggles that the people have. And there's a quote from that my wife and I like to say is, food? Who gave you food? Because one of them says that to Jesus. And I'm like, oh yeah, these guys were out there doing this work. Food was probably even something that they weren't too worried about. They were worried about doing the work. And I'm like, yeah, I can give 15 minutes of my evening to the elders quorum business, or when I became word clerk, or gospel doctrine teacher, and as the ball rolls, you realize, yeah, I got a little bit of time to serve.
yeah. So one thing you haven't talked about is your drinking problem. How did you deal with that, and how did help Christ help you pull out of that?
So I got active in the church again, and I was still drinking. I probably showed up to the ward before this one still maybe a little bit intoxicated a couple of times, or at least hungover. And because when you're drinking that much alcohol, it takes 10, 12, 14 hours to get out of your system. So I probably showed up to that. But maybe 6 months, a year after I moved into this ward, I wanted to go to the temple. So, you've got to answer the temple recommend interview questions. And one of those is, are you obeying the word of wisdom? So I was like, hey, I'm just going to quit. Probably not the safest thing to do with the amount of alcohol I was drinking. You can literally die, but I'm stubborn, so I just quit. And I had one drink at a friend's funeral. Beer was being passed around and other substances, and I just took a beer and had it. And that's the only time in that 7, 8 year period that I kind of stepped off that path. And then immediately I was like, whoops, shouldn't have done that. And I have an app on my phone that tells me, down to the minute how long I've been sober. I reset the clock and was like, I'm not going to do that again, because, the word of wisdom. I want to go to the temple. I want to go to God's house.
That's amazing. That's a phenomenal story. So let me ask you this then. Was the temple worth it?
Absolutely. Um, when I did my endowment, I don't go nearly as often as I should, but even though it's only 45 minutes away, but there was just something about the endowment ceremony and being there and seeing those things, and just I was also a Freemason before I joined the church, so I see Freemasonry as kind of like this imitation of the priesthood, because it has some of the pieces but not all of them. It tells you how to be a
Mhm.
better man and live by a moral compass. But when I went to the temple, it was like, oh, all this makes sense now. Like here's the as much of the picture I'm probably going to get on this side of the veil. And I was just like, I don't ever want to lose this.
Yeah. How did the temple help you connect with Christ?
Let me think how to say this since I don't want to go into the ritual. The information presented in the temple, I think, made my relationship with Christ just a little bit more real because there are things that you see and hear, and I'm the kind of person that kind of learns by doing and seeing and hearing. And seeing it presented in that way, kind of like in Freemasonry, where it's almost like a play that you're a part of, and those concepts make way more sense to me when I'm part of it than when I'm just reading it, and it just made me feel like, oh yeah, my relationship is real. It's not like my relationship with famous podcasters that I listen to and they have no idea I exist. It's like, no, here's this thing that all of these people have gone through as a collective, and we're all doing this to emulate, you know, what God wants us to do and what Jesus has done, and we get to see kind of the love and stuff that's there. I'm really struggling for words on this, but it made it more real to me.
That's awesome. So you talk about um, getting married,
Mm-hmm.
and that I you were married after your patriarchal blessing, right?
Yeah, I got married. Um, I think it would have been 1 year after we were supposed to get sealed. 1 year, give or take a day. It wasn't exactly a year from when I was endowed. It may have
Okay.
been two
And
years.
so was that mentioned in your patriarchal blessing?
Uh, I was told that I would find someone, and I didn't believe it. And even that
Really?
was, yeah, well, because I had been going to the mid-stake singles, and I'd been dating outside of the church, you know, for a decade or whatever, all the apps, Tinder, and all that stuff. But the mutual app, dating app, had just kind of surfaced a little. It was still pretty new, and I installed it, and I was like, yeah, whatever. And I had two or three like solid matches. Um, and one was my wife, and one was a girl in California that we're friends with on Facebook now, and her husband. But my wife happened to be driving through the state and fell within my search radius, and she was on vacation with family, going to the eastern part of the country from. She was living in Idaho at the time, teaching on the Navajo reservation, and her family's from Missouri, so they were driving through, and she fell within like the 200-mile radius I had narrowed it down to because I was tired of talking to people in like California and stuff. And we kind of talked on and off for a year and a half, and she started coming out and visiting. She moved to Missouri to teach in Missouri, and that made it a lot closer because she could get here in like 8 hours, 9 hours, and like it just happened so quickly after the patriarchal blessing, and I was just like, whoa. It was the thing that was kind of like, oh yeah, this might be real.
This might be real. God had plans you didn't even conceive of.
Yeah, well, and then my wife served a mission. She's a lifer. She's from Cannon stock, so like, the miscreant convert, married the probably like the best person I could have because she's definitely my helpmeet. She keeps me even keeled.
Hmm, that's awesome. So, what do you think Christ does to help your marriage?
Patience. I am not a patience person, but Christ probably showed the most patience anyone ever could have. He suffered for all of our sins to the point of bleeding out of his pores. And if that's not patience and love, then I don't know what is. And we got married. We lost our first two temple sealing dates because of COVID lockdowns. So we got married in the
Mm.
meeting house parking lot in rush hour traffic with just her parents and my non member mother and our bishop at the time. And then eventually we got sealed about 6, 7 months later. But so we get thrown into lockdown and we're living with my mother in a tiny 2 bedroom apartment. And you're 30 something and suddenly you have someone sharing a room with you and you're just like, yeah, I need patience. And there were definitely some rocky times, but I was like, here's this thing, and it said this woman was going to come into my life, and here we are. And even with like the temple, like we were like, come on, are you kidding me again? And then the meeting houses were shut down. So here we are just on our own, and we jump right into it, and we're doing sacrament in the house at the time. And here I am blessing the sacrament for my wife in our kitchen, and I'm just like, this is the most Jesus thing. Like, unless we start wandering on the road and helping lepers, like how more could it get like this stuff? And Jesus was just that role model and that person to like emulate during that time, and to seek advice from.
Yeah. So what's a teaching of Christ that has really impacted you since he's become a more prominent figure in your life?
Service. You'd always seen like the Mormon helping hands in their yellow shirts and stuff, like in the news and everything. But we had been in this house maybe 2 or 3 months, and I wake up one morning and I'm like, did she get up at some point and start the laundry? And I go to the basement stairs to see, and there's water just geysering out of our basement floor. We had had
Oh
12
my
inches of
goodness.
rain in an hour shortly before we woke up, and couldn't get a cell phone signal. We're both like mildly catatonic. My wife's basically shut down, and I'm just pacing around the property trying to get a cell phone signal because we're kind of in the sticks, and I guess the storm had taken out a tower or something. Finally, I get one text out to the bishop, and I'm just like, well, I hope someone comes. And not a half hour later, here comes 7 people with buckets, and they're just helping us bail out. And I'm like, it's 7 o'clock in the morning on a Saturday, and one text message, and here's all these people. Just yep, throw whatever we're doing to the ground, and we're just going to be there and help you. And I think that was the moment when I realized I have to really serve people, um,
Hmm.
because that was nothing for them. They were here for an hour. They got wet, whatever. They'll dry their clothes and take a shower. But for us, it snapped us out of this terrifying situation. Um, Oddly enough, right before they walked in, the water started receding, but they helped us clean up and comfort us and asked if we needed anything. And just that small little tender mercy. It makes you think of when Jesus is alive and walking around, and he just stops and like sees someone and is like, hey, how can I help you? And that's what they did for us. And probably for the next 2 years, any chance I had, I would call them out in class or in fast and testimony meeting and be like, I thank you so much for your service. I wish I could be more like you and more like that elder brother of ours, Jesus Christ.
Service has an incredible way to bind hearts of people who maybe aren't even that close, right?
Yeah.
And those people came over and served you, and all of a sudden now they're tight brothers, especially in that moment. And Jesus has this incredible way to bring people together. And sometimes we wonder, why does life have to be so hard? Why do there have to be so many trials? Why do we have to go through hardships? Well, maybe it's because in God's divine plan, he wants us to learn to care about other people. And it's like when I'm in a good spot, my friend's probably not in a good spot. And when my friend's in a good spot, maybe I'm not in a good spot. And we're constantly back and forth helping each other serve and love and care for each other. And hopefully in the end, what do we learn? We become brothers and sisters. And hopefully we learn to love like Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And
What
something
would
you
you
said
add to
there
that?
made me think of the first or second week I moved into this ward. Whatever week was elders quorum, a guy gets up and he starts telling a story. And he's like, yeah, we were at Brother Lloyd's house, and there was Brother so and so, and he wasn't doing very well in health and really wanted to go fish. And his wife asked if we could take him fishing. We didn't think that he was up to it with his oxygen and wheelchair and all this stuff. So in Brother Lloyd's garage, we set up a kiddie pool, stocked it with some fish, and then this is, I don't like new people in person. Online, I'm your best friend, but you get me in person in a new building in a strange location, and I'm just so uncomfortable. And he's telling this story, and I'm like, I did my missionary discussions at people's house called the Lloyds. So as soon as the meeting was over, I walked up to him and I go, that brother Lloyd, did he live over in such and such neighborhood? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, did he have two daughters and a son? Yeah. Were their names this and this and this? Yeah. And I'm like, I did my missionary discussions there. So his act of service 10, 15 years before to brighten a brother's day with that little fishing thing is silly, putting fish in a pool in someone's garage in like March or whatever. That act of service did not just help that guy in that moment, but 10, 15 years down the road, that helped me. That made me feel like I was home, that I could still come to church, that I had a connection to these people, even though I had moved. And it was just like, wow. And you think about all the things that Jesus did for people, and then how many of those people probably went on to act as missionaries and to tell of the good things that Jesus did for their lives. And I'm just like, I hope I can do that someday. And that's why I like put my testimony online and stuff. It's maybe that's going to resonate with just one person. If it helps one person, it helped me. So someone else can benefit. I'm just trying to, pay it forward, I guess.
What I'm getting a sense of as I hear your story a little bit more is like the fingerprints of God as you look back like a detective looks at, a crime scene and they search and find fingerprints.
Yeah.
Well, as we look at Ryan Mercer's life, especially as you've gone through, these dark moments and the struggling moments, and you look back and you're like, well, God was there, God was there, God was there. God was showing up in your life, Ryan. And what does all this mean for you about Jesus Christ? As Jesus Christ showed up, like at that day, this guy, he could have told the story without saying the word Brother Lloyd, and you would have never seen that connection.
Yeah.
But there were tender mercies all over the place. Fingerprints of the Lord. As you look back on your life, what does that tell you about Jesus Christ?
To me, it says that he was real and he did what our scriptures tell us he did. Like, he wasn't just this guy or this mythical figure. He had a real impression on the world. He still has a real impression on the world. And you see it all the time in people when they give a talk or their testimony. They also have those moments where it's like, oh, there's that fingerprint of God. There's that person emulating Jesus that's making this connection that's probably well beyond coincidence. Even with my wife, she had been in the ward. It was like a month or two after the lockdown restrictions ended, and then one of her students comes through from Idaho into Indiana as they're a missionary, and then a couple of months later, another student comes through our ward in Indiana from Idaho. I think that one was from Missouri, and it's like, oh, yeah, you're letting us know that we're part of this big family, and like we're meant to be interacting with each other, and sometimes we need those little boosts. It's almost like a high five from Jesus. He's like, hey, I'm gonna send you this high five, and that high five is someone appearing in your life or that story or something that's relatable. And it was like when he was telling all the parables to people, and he was coming down to their level and telling them something they could understand to internalize that thing. And that's something I love about the ancient Jewish culture that I wish we had more in our lives. But I guess kind of when we share our stories is how we relate to those few people and give them that kind of tether, like he was giving people a tether.
Awesome. So, as a last witness, who is Jesus Christ to you?
And I've said it a bunch, but I really liked in my patriarchal blessing where he was referred to as my elder brother.
Mm.
I have a bunch of half siblings that I'm not close to. Some of them I've never even met. But joining the church, I felt like I really had that brother, that much older, wiser brother, because I can look at his life and go, yeah, I should be more like that. Or I can look at the things I've done and take satisfaction in that, hey, I did the right thing there. Or maybe I could try a little bit harder. If I did that much with that effort, well, what if I give a little more like he did? Because he gave it all. And it's nice having that person, that role model, that, this perfect being that went through all of those things. And if he could do it, I don't want to disappoint him when we get to the other side of the veil. He's going to be like, come on, man, why don't you try just a little bit harder? So, I don't get crazy, but I try a little bit harder when I think about those things that he did. in when he was alive, or later when he, appeared in the Americas to the people that had come here, or even when he appeared to some of the members of the early restored church. And I don't want to disappoint my big brother.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your witness today, Ryan. I really appreciate it. I just want to testify to the world that as we look back in our journey, if you look close enough, we'll see the fingerprints of God and see the fingerprints of the Savior, that He's intimately involved in our life. He's relentlessly pursuing each and every one of us to come to Him to receive His grace and His redemption, and that He truly loves each of us, and He truly loves you out there wherever you are. And I leave that with you today, and I tell you I want to encourage everybody to have a great walk this week with the Savior, and everybody have a great day.